Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today, sorry about that. We're going to be doing part 64, so I'm quite excited to get stuck into this one. We've got an old returning modder coming in. We've got actually two, actually. And then we've got a couple other really interesting mods and remakes and things like that, and some new cosmetics. So I'm really excited to get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off today with Jagged Fang Designs, who's managed to come back, which I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about one of their first cosmetic mods. So this is a cosmetic for an animal already in the game. We have got Nigersaurus. So this is everyone's favorite. Oh, we're going to let them walk out a little bit more. Everyone's favorite kind of weird African Rebecca-saurid. It's been a bit of a meme recently for some non-PG reasons, but really cool. Mainly just swear words, but or slurs you could say, but really awesome animal here. So Nigersaurus is kind of famous for being the dinosaur with over 500 teeth and being that weird little Rebecca-saurid with big downturned jaw. So you can see, we actually know from its placement of the skull, we can see where the head and neck connect, that actually would have walked around a lot with its head down like that. Even though the neck would probably be up, it'd walk its head down. So this is probably allow it to better graze, since these guys are thought to be very much grazers. But you can see that really interesting design there with a little bit of that keratin beak design. It's a little bit controversial whether it was actually considered a keratin beak with just some keratinous covering across their mouth like that. So really cool to stick with that interpretation. Love their really wide faces. It definitely is such an awesome look. We love the wide faces of the Nigersaurus. Love the colors on it too. I love the pattern, especially on this newer version, because we've covered Jagged Fangs Nigersauruses a couple times throughout Jurassic World Evolution 1, but now we finally get it back in 2. And we can see some of the wonderful colors. Really do love the texture. And there's a little bit of variety, as you can see. This one's kind of like a little darker one. This one's a lot more bright and greenish, which I definitely like. Definitely a bit of variety if you guys are interested. So yeah, Rebeccasaurus has a little bit of a shorter neck compared to a lot of other sauropods. Rebeccasaurs are kind of known for having shorter necks and being quite weird. And as the Rebeccasaurs with diplodocids, so they were late surviving diplodocids that managed to make it into the Cretaceous and evolved to be quite weird little guys. Still really cool though. You can also see here we've got that really interesting. We've got the proper foot anatomy as well. You can see there's quite long kilometer legs. Also got that no toes in terms of claws, only that dew claw there, and a kind of fleshy horseshoe design, which is really cool. Really managed to get that quite well, and the back foot as well is quite nice. Got the two big curved toes and that fleshy pad at the back there. Jagged Fang Designs is typically really good with their anatomy, and that really long tail. And I love actually those kind of bands, especially how they translate different designs. This is like a milk snake. You can see it's kind of brighter in this one, and this one's a little bit darker. So definitely a little bit of variety. There's about 4 different skins you can get that have got a bit of variety, and I think it's really nice that we get a bit of a different variety with these guys. So yeah, really cool. So we're going to let these little Rebeccasaurs, little Nigersaurs run off and do their thing. And we've got a new species from these guys as well. So this one here is Colliorhynchus. Really awesome guy. Let's see if we can get a good picture of one, and not with his friends. There's a couple over there. But they kind of... We'll have a look at you. You look nice. We'll let you walk out a little bit. So this is Colliorhynchus hancocki. That's this particular species, as we get into. So this is a really interesting animal. It's kind of a famous meme because of that little head there, but these guys are just so cool. I like the skin as well. The skin very much reminds me of a blue-tongue skink. So it's really interesting, like how modern patterns can fit well on extinct animals. So Coleorhynchus as a genus, these are extinct genus of herbivorous synapsids. So they're closely related to things like Dimetrodon, and actually more closely related to things like us than they are to dinosaurs or other reptiles. So they are synapsids, and the type of what they typically are is called a caseid. And these guys come from the lower to middle Permian, and fossils have been found now in what was Texas and Oklahoma in the US. So in terms of description, you can see they've got that very typical caseid morphology. They've got these really, really long forward-facing snouts, but they look quite small. Very large nasal openings as well, as you can see going on there. You can see that quite well represented on this guy. And really interesting. But they've also got really short heads and necks compared to that huge, wide barrel body they've got going on, which kind of makes it kind of a meme because it just looks so goofy looking. But this is kind of one of the more realistic interpretations, as you can imagine. But they're also quite famous for having quite big, sprawled out legs, especially the front legs quite big, and the quite long tail. They've got very long and heavy ribs that make them have that bulbous body. And the neural spines are actually tall in the pelvic region, so these guys probably had a broad shelf and quite powerful claws, as you can see. Big claws, probably well adapted for digging, and some interpretations interpret them as swimming, as we'll get into. So there's typically about 3 species described. The type species is Romi, there's Hankokkai, and Bensoroni. And the reason this one is Hankokkai is the biggest. So Hankokkai was named by 1953 by Everett Clare Olson from a right humorous, and the species were named after J. Hancock, who actually made it possible to explore much of this locality. And then since there have been more than 60 specimens described of Hankokkai that have been found in several locations in the Knox County, and it pretty much all gives us a pretty good idea of its size and its proportions. So because there's been so many specimens described, we have a pretty good idea. I think it's probably one of the better known out of the 2 species, and it's also the biggest. So these guys would have got up to about 6 meters long, or about 20 feet, and weighed over 500 kilograms, or 1,100 pounds. This would have made it the largest species of its genus, along with the other largest known species of casids, such as Allosaurus. And it would have actually made it one of the most largest non-mammalian synapsids. So pretty much everything that's not an elephant synapsids include us mammals as well. So everything that wasn't a mammal. So there are mammals that would have been bigger, of course, like rhinos, elephants, indracotheres. But in terms of, if you include those kind of really big ones, these guys were still quite big. As I mentioned, they're over 500 kilograms. Oh, whales, of course, too. But yeah, really awesome. So no complete skull is known, but they had a skull quite similar to Romi, which is the smaller species, but slightly larger, and not too different in terms of its anatomy. Some of these are actually not described very much from, especially the species Allosaurus, only described from the genus Allosaurus is described from slightly different anatomy in the arms. So it's very likely if someone went back and looked at taxonomy, they may be lumped in the same genus or even same species, because a lot of them are defined on very small differences. But yeah, very, very interesting on these guys. So in terms of their stratigraphic distribution, these guys, as I mentioned, there's been no radiometric dating, but these guys come from the Clear Fork Formation in Texas. So these guys would have been around the lower to middle Permian. So very, very old animals. And Barsoni is the youngest one, and I believe that Hankokkai is kind of in the middle. But in the Permian, at this time, the world would have been one big single supercontinent called Pangaea. And there were cases pretty much all around the world, but Barsoni would have been found a lot in America. That's where it's typically found. And in terms of the habitats that it lived in, these guys were mostly fluvial, so they would have been coastal plains with lots of lakes and lagoons where these guys would have been found. The San Angola Formation, I believe, has Hankokkai as well. That would have been probably a little bit drier, silt mud, lots of that, so still lots of estuarine lakes and seas, which is really interesting. In terms of diet, as you can see, these guys have got that big... Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Have a look here. They've got their big round bodies. You can kind of see there. Really, really funny looking. So these guys have those big barrel rib cage that indicates these guys would have been grazers. So they would have had large digestive systems that would have allowed them to eat lots of low nutrition plants. And the decision of Coelurungus also shows that they were clearly herbivorous. So these guys would have been eating a lot of plants. And their teeth were well adapted for slicing up plants. And the hyoid actually, in some cases, actually showed that these guys may have had a massive tongue that it would help with swallowing and potentially maybe some of the adaptations maybe to help better grasp things, which would have been really cool, but it's a little bit more speculative. And the tongue would press the plants against the palate and be able to break up food, since that would have also helped with digestion. And the low number of teeth, or cuspals in the teeth of Coelurungus suggests that these guys were adapted to different fodder than other species of casids that had higher cusps. These guys may have been a little bit more generalist, being bigger, just eating whatever they can get their mouths around, really, while smaller species may have been a little bit better adapted for eating specific types of plants. These guys would have been a little more generalist. And these guys have had a little bit of debate about their ecology. There's been a lot of debate talking about whether these guys might have been more terrestrial or semi-aquatic, and what species potentially, or what genera of casids may have been more aquatic and terrestrial. So they were originally conceived as primarily terrestrial, as they got big, strong forelimbs, massive claws and stuff that would have been quite good for a terrestrial lifestyle. But they did not rule out that they could have been quite good swimmers. But in 2016, there was another study that came out that looked at these guys and suggested they may have actually been semi-aquatic and things like that, and well adapted for feeding on semi-aquatic plants and things like that. And that was a very interesting hypothesis. So they would have had a proto-diaphragm potentially that helped with breathing in aquatic environments, because that diaphragm would allow them to get more air out quickly so they could take a breath and then dive. Though a lot of the habitats these guys have been found in, as they've been around a lot of lakes or rivers as well, that's kind of a big thing that may have suggested that. But a lot have also been found in more upland areas where these guys wouldn't have had much access to water. So that hypothesis has also been around as well. Another one is the microstructure of the bones is actually quite similar to what we see of cetaceans and pinnipeds, so very similar to whales and dolphins and seals. They would have been able to had bones very similar to them that allowed them to be much more kind of better able to move in the water, which is quite interesting, and also may depend on some species, things like that. But in 2022, kind of the latest evidence of this, these guys are proposed to be that somewhat different kind of aquatic lifestyles, where the large casids may have been equivalent to like modern hippos, spending part of their time at the water and then coming out on land for food, which is very interesting. And it seems there would have been degrees of this, as some had more, even this species that is described in this paper, Latidorhynchus, which is like a relative of Coelurungus, which even had more osteoporotic bones, would have been much better adapted for living in water like a hippo, and that's why they think is kind of the equivalent. Some would have been better at it, others, there's a lot of variety and a lot of differences in the ecology there, so I think it's typically open to interpretation. We have some evidence that could lead to it, but really could be just a species by species basis, because even if you look at modern hippos or even extinct hippos, some are a lot more terrestrial than others. Even like pygmy hippos, they are typically a lot more terrestrial than common hippos, so I think that's quite interesting interpretation. You could just go with really what seems to be the case. Yeah, these are really, really cool animals. Really do love these guys. So yeah, we're going to let these guys run off. So this is the Primalis skin. They've got a couple other skins as well. I don't think the cosmetic was quite right, so I can only pick the one. But yeah, look at these guys. I love Coelurungus. Really, really funny looking animals. They're a good meme because of their short head. And people are like, how the hell do they even drink? But yeah, I love these guys. And fits well on the Dimetrodon. Definitely a big fan. Okay, so we're going to let you run off and do your thing. Alright, so next up we have got the last Jagged Fang design animal. We've got Concavenator.
The Concavenator is quite literally a hunter with a hump. So please, please, please keep it sweet, because I really don't want to have to flee from this Spanish predator.
I guess we got a little bit of information from that. That was quite fun. Okay, we'll have a look at you as the other one. Oh, there it is. But it's in the group. Oh, we'll have a look at this one here. We've got the wonderful Concavenator. So as I mentioned, it's the Spanish hunter with a hump. Actually, the smallest confirmed Karanis that weighed a little under 600 kilograms. Be really, really cool. Estimated 6 meters long or so, but you can see this is based a little bit more accurately, or you could say the other one is still pretty spot on, but this one's a little bit more hyper accurate, you could say. I'm pretty sure there's a version of it with quills. This one hasn't got any quills on it, which is also a fine interpretation. The quill thing is a little bit controversial, but it is interesting to show that maybe the feathers or stuff is a lot more plastic within dinosaurs than we give them credit for. But this is interpretation without them, which is also fine. But yeah, really, really cool. Love the colors on this one. Very much similar to the older versions of the Jagged Fang ones. You got that big spots there, kind of lines there. Definitely upgrades on the textures. I love the textures. And the dark feet as well. Looks really, really nice. And like this little bit of color, a little bit of blue around the back there. But yeah, this is pretty much like really good anatomy, really good. Even though the game originally wasn't that bad, it just had more of a really skinny texture and didn't follow the anatomy quite as religiously, you could say, as this one does. But yeah, really, really cool. Love Jagged Fang. Always this wonderful designs. Same with the Nigersaurus. So we're going to let them run off, do their thing, and then we're going to have a look at another returning mod. This one's been kind of on and off for a while. We've got Torvosaurus. So I'm not going to cover too much of Torvosaurus because we've already covered it a couple dozen times, I think, or a couple times. So we're just going to give a quick overview of Torvosaurus. So here we've got Torvosaurus, and of course that happens. So lots of technical difficulties today, seems to be one of those days. But here's our Torvosaurus. So Torvosaurus is a genus of large megalosaurine theropod dinosaurs, so it's a relative things like Megalosaurus, animals like that. It lived approximately 165 to 148 million years ago during the Carbonian and Tithonian of the late Jurassic. And there are two species recognized. There's Torvosaurus tanneri, that is from Portugal. No, it's from America. Guernii is from Portugal, and there's a third unnamed species from Germany, but it's possible that tanneri has been recognized in Tanzania as well. So a very wide range. So in terms of its discovery, it was discovered in 1979, with the type species tanneri was named, and it was largely heavily built and could grow to probably about 9 meters long and weigh about 2 metric tons. And it was actually one of the largest terrestrial predators of its time. It was almost a T-Rex before the T-Rex. And was among the larger, along with Saurophaganax and Ebunterius, which could be the same as Allosaurus, but Allosaurus, whatever you need, taxonomy it. But Guernii, which was the Portugal one, was actually got quite a bit bigger, measured about 10 to 11 meters. In length, about 4 to 5 metric tons, and suggesting it was much larger than Titanis and the largest terrestrial carnivore of the late Jurassic, which is very interesting. So as I mentioned, being found all over the world, lots of different specimens. The Tanneri is mostly found in America in the Morrison Formation, so those are what the famous animals you know and love. And then there's the Guernii that lived in Portugal, lived in the with like Miragaia, Dicraeus, Dinosaurus, Luster Titan, those kind of guys. Very similar equivalents, like Brachiosaurus and Luster Titan, very similar. They would have been very similar faunas, just different genera. It's quite interesting. But as I mentioned, quite big. There's not too many differences other than size and location as well. And as we'll get into with the Marker Rex, which is the next cosmetic, and Marker Rex could have got about 12 meters or so, and is believed to be potentially the same as Titanis, could have got quite big, about 12 meters. So comparable in size to a T-Rex, though just not quite as heavy, because they're not quite as big and bulky. But as I mentioned, Megalosaurus are related to things like Megalosaurus and Duravenator and such. And these guys, there's actually been research into fossil embryos of Torvosaurus, and they believe they potentially may have had oviviparous, which means they laid eggs. And they may have actually not been those good parents, I believe. They could have provided parental care, but they may have abandoned them. But they shells were tightly porous, so these guys would have had to have buried them into the ground to protect them and make sure they were properly incubated, since they couldn't sit on the eggs. So whether they stayed around and guarded the nest like modern crocodiles, or just left them like sea turtles, we really don't know. But in terms of all documented specimens from the Morrison Formation, likely adult or immature specimens, so they're mostly adults. But some of the bigger ones, like Marcarex, could have been an adult. But it seems like these guys kind of had a type B1 survivorship, so these guys would have mortality increasing after sexual maturity was achieved, and then leading to abundance of mature individuals in the fossil record for whatever reason, or could have been luck with the fossilization being as it is. Might have just got a lot of adults fossilized and haven't found many babies yet. But yeah, as I mentioned, these guys would have lived all across the world. So in North America, they would have shared the habitat with animals like Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Allosaurus, the Dinosaurs, those kind of similar animals of the Morrison Formation. And in Europe, they would have actually shared the formation with the very closely related Hominidoraptor and the Loharina Formation, and would have lived with the equivalents of kind of those Morrison species, like the Tyrannosaurus, which is very similar to Diplodocus, Camptosaurus as well, Dinosaurus merigaya, which was Stegosaurus, very similar to Stegosaurus. And then in Africa, they would have lived in with Giraffatitan, Jasonia, Allosaurus, Ostaphacosaurus, which is a really early Spinosaurid, those kind of animals. So very similar, even though the world Pangea was just coming apart, around the world there were quite similar faunas, but they were splitting off and doing their own thing a little bit. And then there have been some possible remains from South America, where they've been found sandstone stuff, so they would have been living with very similar animals like Silurus or some sauropods. It's not quite as well described in there, but very similar potential ecology with some ceratosaurs and some sauropods and ornithopods and things like that, so that's quite interesting. But in these habitats, they would have been living with all sorts of different large carnivores, such as Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Saurophaganax in United States, Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, and Loharinosaurus were venenator in Portugal, and then possibly in Tanzania, Brispirosaurus, Rostafricosaurus, where they all would have been living in different ecological niches. And it's been estimated or thought that these guys would have been hanging around waterways, but I imagine, considering their ecology, they may have just been more in kind of like being robust, that they may have been living in more forested areas compared to Allosaurus. And there would have been ways they would have been avoiding each other's competition. Since we have ecosystems today where animals have so many big predators, like Africa, we have lions and hyenas and wild dogs, and they all manage to find their own niche. So they probably managed to do it as well. So the majority of Torvosaurus remains have been found with multiple taxa. They may have been a minor component. So these guys would have been more rare, potentially, in ecosystem, while Allosaurus may have been much more common. And there have been bite marks on Allosaurus moropaltal remains that believe they could be coming from large Torvosaurus or Saurophaganax, which may just be Allosaurus. It's a whole taxonomic thing. So these guys would have been big predators in the ecosystem. So yeah, really, really cool. Do love Torvosaurus. I think it's the only big animal or the big theropod left that's worth putting in the game, because Torvosaurus is quite cool. I really hope he gets added to the game eventually. I love Torvosaurus. But yeah, really, really cool mod. I'm definitely a big fan. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing. And then we're going to have a look at Marcarex real quick. Okay, so there's been a couple genera lumped into Torvosaurus because of, taxonomy being taxonomy. So in 1992, there was a large theropod bone found in Como Bluff, Wyoming, which was named by Robert T. Barker by Marcarex. And it was actually suggested it would rival T-Rex in its length, and it does. It's quite big, about 12 meters as well. And that seems to be the appropriate size ceiling, quote-unquote, for large terrestrial dinosaur meat-eaters. And then it was often considered a junior synonym of Torvosaurus, but a detailed analysis has not been carried out yet. And the same site has been ready to consider remains of which the nomen nubium or nondescript Brontoraptor is used. But typically, most people consider both Brontoraptor and Marcarex to be just large individuals of Torvosaurus tanneri. But they require reclassification, as all the specimens prior to indicated that reached adult size and both incomplete specimens like osteological descriptions. So really don't know, but it's likely they would have just been very large individuals of Torvosaurus. And actually, they would have been about 10, 12 meters long. And we know that Guernii, which was the European species that lived in Portugal, would have got to those sizes. So it's very likely that could have just been an adult one of Torvosaurus tanneri. So they both could have got still quite big. So yeah, it's really just lacking people not looking into it. But that's what the reasonable hypothesis is at the moment. But yeah, really love the designs of the two different contrasting ones. It's one of those mods that gets revisited over and over again. But I do like that we're getting something a little bit more realistic. And I like the different colors. You've got like this reddish one there with a couple colors and this greenish one with a little bit of different patterns. Definitely a big fan. So we're going to let you run off, do your thing. So next up, we're moving some big carnivores. So this guy was done by Master Dude. So Master Dude's going to be covering a few of the mods so far. The next couple mods will be by Master Dude. So next up, we have got Titanis. Get a good picture of you since you're not so tall and weird. And you do that again. Of course. So we got Titanis. Really, really cool animal here. So Titanis, which means Titan in Greek mythology. These are a genus of forest racid, or terror birds, that were an extinct group of large predatory birds that came from South America. But these guys were the only member of that group of the forest racids to make it into the United States, and lived in the United States during the Pliocene and early Pleistocene. So it was first described by amateur archaeologists Benjamin Waller and Robert Allen from the Santa Fe River in Florida, and the names were Titanowalkeri after by ornithologist Peter Babcock in 1963, with the name honoring Waller. So the holotype itself is Baterius fragmentary, having metatarsus and things like that, but actually comes from one of the largest forest racids known. And following its description, there's been many more isolated elements coming from areas such as Florida, Texas, and California, and is actually in the subfamily of the Forest Racine, which includes some of the latest and largest forest racids such as Kalankan and some other guys. So as I mentioned in terms of discovery, discovered in 1961 and 2 by Benjamin Waller and Robert Allen, found in the Santa Fe River, as I kind of mentioned that there. So it seems that these guys may have lived with like Equids nifidus and Borophagus, which is the bone-crushing dog, at about 2.2 to 1.8 million years ago. But then since then, as I mentioned, there's been quite a few discoveries. So there's a site in Florida and also California that are early Pliocene, and most late Pleistocene kind of fossil localities are in Florida. So these guys would have been living around probably Mexico and southern Florida, southern US, around from the Pliocene to the latest Pleistocene. Seems like they were doing there. So they probably went extinct. So the oldest Titanis fossil is about 5 million years old. And then the youngest would have been about 2.2 to 1.8. So right at the early Pleistocene. So that's interesting. So as I mentioned, these guys are forest racids. So I'll talk a little bit about forest racids because they're a very interesting group. So during the early Cenozoic, after the non-avian dinosaurs, the mammals kind of went all over the place. But there were some bird groups that got quite big. That includes moas, and elephant birds, the dormions in Australia, and the forest racids in South America. So South America, these guys are from an extinct group within the Caraformes that includes today the Seriemas, but these guys are much more differently related. So these guys kind of took that big predator niche within South America at the time, and the oldest forest racids come right from the Paleogene, and as I mentioned, Titanis is actually the last living member of that group, living right into the Pleistocene. Early Pleistocene, so it's quite interesting. And it's unclear why they went extinct, but they would have competed with all sorts of different mammalian predators, such as the Smilus, which disappeared in the Pliocene. And Titanis itself would have actually lived with Smilodon, Ension, or the dire wolf, American cheetahs, and short-faced bears, and probably went extinct at the late Pliocene, potentially due to competition. So these guys, as I mentioned, they would have been in forest racines. They would have been related to animals such as Kalankan, but there was many other groups and different. There's a very long history with these guys. It's really cool. So these guys, you can see, very large flightless birds with small wings, big elongated heads with curved beak. So they would have been allowed them really well to attack prey, and they would have had wide feet and potentially a stronger middle toe. There has been many size estimates of Titanis, but the most recent ones consider them to be about, I believe, 2 meters tall. Is it? Yeah, it's been downsized a little bit. So probably about 2 meters tall and about 150 kilograms, which still makes it one of the largest, but it was smaller than things like Kalankan. But these guys would have still been quite big. 130 kilograms at about 2 meters tall. So still huge animals. And as you can see, that skull, very interesting skull. They got that big, bulky head with that overturned, which would have been likely very well adapted for biting into animals. And there's been hypotheses of, they'd be able to whack prey with it. And there seems to be evidence potentially they may have had a crest with possible sexual dimorphism, but we just really don't have the specimens to tell. But still really, really cool. So if it's postcranial, it's a very, very heavily built animal, a big, big animal. So they would have been, actually, they had enlarged ungles very similar to Dromaeosaurus. So they would have almost been like a big velociraptor after they went extinct, of course. And they had very small wings that weren't used for flight, and they may have actually used their claws as well. And they actually suggest they may have had like claws on their hands very similar to Dromaeosaurus, but it seems like they didn't have that. But they would have potentially used their they would have had long flight feathers on their arms, but they suggest that these guys had those quite big toes and feet, would have been able to pin prey, very similar to how Seraemas will pin prey today. So very interesting ecology there. They would have been able to pin large prey to the ground and rip it apart with their beak potentially. And we actually do not know that much about its paleobiology, and many of its ecology has been inferred from its relatives. So these guys have been thought to be primarily predators and scavengers, particularly top predators. So these guys would have been preying on all sorts of different animals within their size range, and they were, as I mentioned, flightless. And they also had large eyes, very similar to hawks. So these guys had quite good eyesight, and actually had lacrimal bones that actually protected their eyes from the sun. So these guys would have lived in open areas hunting prey. So that's what we think they would have been doing. And in terms of leg function, they have tried to estimate the strength of these guys, and it actually was greater than a modern ostrich. And though these estimates are likely due to the large size of the birds, these guys could actually break in the long bones of medium-sized mammals, such as gazelles or tigers. So these guys would have probably been good at hunting small animals. And there's also been research that suggests that these guys could break into the armor of glyptodonts and things like that. And it doesn't seem they would have been able to. But these guys would have probably been able to really good kicking weapons with their legs, potentially both to attack prey and to fight each other and hold down prey as well. So these guys would have probably been quite fast and quite strong with their legs to be able to grab those things. And they were as quick as a greyhound. While there were other predators they were limited in numbers and not as fast as the Saurus rockets. These guys may have been able to take that niche, being much faster than a lot of the predators that it lived with, and may have actually crudely resembled Tyrannosaurus with its kind of large head, small forelimbs, and very long legs, and very similar adaptations. So its head as well was quite well adapted. There's been lots of research into their skull and neck kind of functionality. So these guys would have been quite similar. They would have been compared, lost rigidity skull compared to like white-tailed eagles and Seraemas. So they would have been able to kind of pull back their head, and actually suggest these guys would have used strikes with their beak to kind of attack and retreat, and then restrain their prey with their talons, and had quite flexible nexus as well, which is also quite interesting. So in terms of these guys' environment, during the Belkian stage, these guys would have lived alongside both endemic mammals as well as new immigrants from Asia and South America. So this was a really weird time in the Holocene. This would have been the Great American Interchange, so where animals from America and North and South America kind of interchanged. And actually, along with ground sloths and glyptodonts, Titanis was actually one of the animals that migrated up from South America up north, which is really interesting. And at the time, it would have lived with quite a few interesting species, such as pampathirs and glyptodonts, so big armadillos, a lot of peccaries, pronghorns, and white-tailed deers. Carnivores lived with borophagines or bone-crushing dogs, hyenids, like the running hyena, and saber-toothed cats, and large rodents, all sorts of different animals, big ground sloths as well, early ancestors like early mastodons, things like that would have lived with, which is really, really interesting. And the reason we went extinct is believed to be because of this competition with large placental animals. As we mentioned, there was a lot of like animals like Smilodon. The dire wolves would have been a good competition for these guys, and they actually competed successfully against these groups for several million years until living in North America, and it's believed to have been went extinct around the early Pleistocene, but it's actually believed to, some believe they went extinct about 15,000 years ago, but there's not really much evidence for that. It suggests mostly that it's the late Pleistocene to earliest Pleistocene that would have gone extinct, with some forest rhytids being found in the late Pleistocene that are younger than Titanis, which are closer in time to human arrival, but we don't know if there's any species yet. But yeah, still really interesting. Forest rhytids are definitely a very interesting group of animals. I do love these guys. That's Titanis. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing, of course. Alright, so next animal we've got by Master Doot as well. So Master Doot did the Titanis and did this one. This is Appalachiosaurus. And doing it again. Why is that bug not being fixed? Anyway, let's have a look. We'll have a look at you since you're in. So this is Appalachiosaurus. Is a genus of early or basal eukaryotic theropod dinosaur that comes from the Middle Cretaceous or Middle Cambrian age from what is North America. So the type specimen is found by Auburn University geologist David King in 1982, and it comes from the Appalachian Mountains in the eastern United States, which would have been an ancient island continent when this guy was lived, because the America was split by the Western Interior Seaway. And it's named after the Appalachian Mountains, so it's basically the Appalachian lizard, so that's kind of where its name is. And the one known species is Montgomeryensis, comes from Montgomery County in Alabama, which is quite interesting. And it was described in 2005 by Thomas Carr and Thomas Williamson. So there is only one specimen, I believe, and it's from a juvenile. This is weighed to be about 6.5 meters, or about 21 feet long, and 623 kilograms, or a little over 300 pounds. But so far, it's only known from skull, lower jaw, as well as some vertebrae in most of the legs, with the remains being housed in the McWane Science Center in Birmingham, Alabama. And there are several other open sutures in the bones of the skull that suggest it as a juvenile, but it may have actually got a bit bigger. And there's a row of 6 slow crest lines on the top of its snout that actually suggest it was similar to the Alioramus in that regard, although most tyrannosaurs have ornamentation on their face to some extent. And the only remains are from a juvenile, which meaning the size and weight of an adult is unknown, and it's actually quite significantly different from another early tyrannosaur, Dryptosaurus, what we believe. The arms of these guys are also poorly known, and they're characterized because large tyrannosaurs are primarily characterized by their small arms with 2 fingers. Although some humerus are ascribed to Appalachiosaurus, no arm material is known. Early reconstructions actually give it that large, 3 arms, three clawed arms going on. But they now thought it had been much shorter with only 2 fingers, since a lot of those earlier relatives had the 2 fingers already. And it has been corrected though. And Appalachia is actually believed to have quite a strong bite force, along with a lot of tyrannosaurs. They had a bite force of about 32,500 newtons, or about 7,109 pounds, 93 pounds by the square inch. Yeah, really interesting. You can see it's got 2 fingers there. So this is what it would have looked like. I really love how the feathers came out in this guy. So as I mentioned, the only complete specimen of Appalachiosaurus was complete enough to be used for statistics. It was originally found to be a member of the Albertosaurine family that includes Albertosaurus and Gorgosaurus, but now it's considered much more basal outside of Tyrannosauridae. However, Asian Tyrannosaurids were excluded, so it could have been like that. So most recent suggest these guys would have been kind of in between other earlier animals like Alcetrosaurus and Dryptosaurus, but before things like Alioramus, and then we've got Tyrannosauridae, which includes like Albertosaurus, Daspletosaurus and Tyrannosaurus and Tarbosaurus and all them, which is really, really cool. So yeah, really, really cool animal. As I mentioned, these guys come from Central Alabama. They date to about 77 million years ago. So kind of early-ish, and it was described in 2005. And interesting as well, there's 2 vertebrae on the tail of the specimen that actually have been fused together. They believe that may be new bone growth because of an injury, so the animal may have hurt itself for whatever reason. Yeah, really, really cool animal. Really love to see Appalachiosaurus. Another interesting dinosaur to talk about. So, yeah, we're going to let you run off, do your thing. So now we just need to wait for you to get out of the way there. Next up, this one was done by Masaduke, but this Dinoterror was done by Danubi, who's an older returning modder that I haven't seen in a while. So let's have a look at Dinoterror. Is it again? Well, I'll have a look at you because you're in a nice pose. So this is Dinoterror, which means powerful terror. They're a monospecific species or genus of Tyrannosaur dinosaur from the late Cretaceous of New Mexico, so Lower Campanian about 78 million years ago, and is now of the Upper Allison member of the Menifee Formation. And there's only one type and only species is Dinoterror dynastes, which is known from a subadult or adult individual that measured about 9 meters long, with an incomplete skeleton. So the specimen itself was discovered in August 2012, with a partial skeletal of Tyrannosaurus dinosaur found from their Menifee Formation, and then was later described in 2018. And contains quite a good holotype specimen. There's right frontals and dorsal ribs and various things like that. The generic name, or Dinoterror, comes from basically Dynamis Terror, so basically it's the powerful terror, or powerful ruler. And in 2020, it was actually considered nomen dubium because it was highly fragmentary and things like that. But it's unclear where it is. But then a more complete specimen was actually identified in 2021, but has not been described in detail. So it's very considered, could be a nomen dubium, could not. It's kind of a watch the space kind of thing. So as I mentioned, these guys to about 9 meters long, and it's known for a bit of the cranium, things like that. Some differences between, it's very similar, more like Nanuqsaurus and Tetraphonius in size, which is quite interesting. Post-crania, there's not too much, but it's not a very well complete specimen. In terms of its classification, these guys are more closely related, a little bit later, as I mentioned, than Appalachiosaurus. These guys would have been kind of in Tyrannosaurine, so they would be related mostly to Tetraphonius and Lythronax, and also to Nanuqsaurus, that will be coming up soon, before the split between just Dinosaurine and obviously Tyrannosaurine. So that suggests what they'd be related to at the moment. And Dinoterror is known from the Upper Allison member of the Menifee Formation that lives about the Lower Campanian, about 78.5 million years ago. So this area would have been a lot of mudstone, siltstone, and a floodplain, so it would have been like a coastal swamp or lagoon where these guys would have been preserved. And this is because they would have been potentially on the eastern coast of the western coast of the Western Interior Seaway. They kind of went right through the middle of America. So these guys have also been found to live with an intermediate ankylosaur, also Menifee ceratops, which is ceratopsian, a couple of hadrosaurs such as ornatops, and another etrosaur that was described, another intermediate tyrannosaurid, dromaeosaurid, similar to Ornitholestes, and also lived with some big crocodilians such as Dinosuchus and Brachychampsa. So a very interesting formation in New Mexico. So yeah, really, really interesting animal. I do not love Dinoterror, though it's not known for very much. So this gives us a pretty good interpretation. Looks really, really cool. Nice that we got a little bit of fun with it. Definitely love seeing Danby back. It's a really good modder, especially back in like the Jurassic World Evolution 1 days. So it's nice to have some older modders coming back into the fray. So I'm quite excited to see more of that. I'm gonna let you run off and do your thing. We'll watch you do the animation. Why not? Very cute. All right. So next up, last but certainly not least, by Husquark Tree, also game videos for life and Viral Cyclops, we have got Nanuqsaurus. So here we are. Oh, it's a little bit struggling, but here is our Nanuqsaurus as we have to deal with that bug again. There we are. We'll have a look at you, since you're kind of the best posed one. So this is Nanuqsaurus, which means polar bear lizard. So this is a genus of Tyrannosaurian theropod that comes from the Maastrichtian of the Prince Creek Formation of North America in Alaska. And is roughly between 70 to 68 million years old, and it contains a single species, Nanuqsaurus holgoldi, which is only known from partial skull and multiple postcranial elements. So it was typically described and referred to as Gorgosaurus, but then the holotype specimen was found in 2006, and it was multiple fragments of the animal's skull, and it was described to be about 600, 700 millimeters long. And it wasn't until its preparation that they found it was a new taxon and described as Nanuqsaurus, which Nanuq means is Inuit for polar bear. So basically means the polar bear lizard. And that's where it comes from. Though initially it was described as a dwarf, you could say dwarf Tyrannosaur, about 5 to 6 meters long, as the holotype. Then there was another specimen that came out that was a bit bigger, that was about 500, similar to Albertosaurus in size. And then an even bigger one that came to about 7 meters and comparable size to a juvenile Torvosaurus. So they were in the 8 to 9 meter range, a lot bigger than we initially thought. But still pretty big animal. So about 500, 900 kilograms. So could have got quite a bit bigger than that. So it was bigger than originally thought. Not very often that we undersize prehistoric animals. But we found bigger remains, such as these guys were comparable in size to Albertosaurus, which is quite cool. And they would have likely resembled other later Tyrannosaurians, such as Spletosaurus, and probably had similar roles in the ecosystem. You know, have that big bulky head, rostrum, things like that. And I like the interpretation, with a lot of fluff, because it was living in slightly cooler habitats as well. As in terms of its relationships, it was in Tyrannosaurine, so it was after the split, the Allorames, so like Alloramus and Quinchalosaurus, would have been related to things like Lythronax and Dinaoterror, but not just outside the group of the Spletosaurine, so it would have been an early relative of those guys, but some people have kind of considered Nanuqsaurus and Novum Dubium, but it's neither here nor there. So in terms of its paleobiology, there's been lots of thinking, because typically we interpret the Mesozoic as being really, really warm, and that's true. These guys were living quite up north, so there would have been colder areas. There's been analysis of the Prince Creek Formation, which would have been a lot cooler than it was today. A lot cooler than we expected. There was snow potentially sometimes. Would have been a lot, not quite as bad as it was today. The world was warmer, but there would have been a lot of like snow and things like that, and then within the months of darkness that would have happened at those high latitudes. So there's been lots of research into looking at that, and there's been research into like all sorts of dinosaurs, and just that these guys would have been around the Arctic year long, so they didn't migrate to get away, and they would have the Nanuqsaurus would have likely lived up there as well, preying on these guys. And it would likely these guys would have laid their eggs during the constant daylight period around the month of April, and then incubate them at that time, and probably hatch in the winter potentially. So they would have had that. They would have been able to cope with the darkness of the 120 days of constant winter darkness each year because of the other animals there. And most of them would have stayed and not migrated. Though there's some that potentially could have, but they would have mostly stayed there. Probably didn't. They were able to survive up there. But in terms of paleoecology, the Nanuqsaurus lived around the Edmontonian stage of the early late Maastrichtian, and lived quite high. So these guys would have lived quite high in the latitudes, and temperatures estimated for the northern environment will range from 10 to 12 degrees in the warmer months, and below -2 to -3.9 degrees in the colder months. So there would have been snow around, but not quite as heavy as today, but they would still have to deal with the low light conditions. And compared to Edmontosaurus and Pachyrhinosaurus, which were coastal lowlands and urban areas, these guys would have been pretty much found everywhere across the Prince Creek Formation. So Edmontosaurus would have lived in lowland areas, Pachyrhinosaurus or the upland areas. So these guys would have been found everywhere, probably paying on both. So other animals that would have lived with these guys were as Leptoceratopsine, Edmontosaurus, which was originally Grunaluk, but now is considered Edmontosaurus, Lambosaurines, Thescalosaurines, all sorts of those guys, Pachyrhinosaurus pectorum, Alaskacephalae, Troodon or Sterinosaurus, Dromaeosaurs, and all sorts of other small dinosaurs that it would have lived with in the Prince Creek Formation. And some marsupials would have actually lived there as well, which is a little bit weird because we often think that they would have been not able to deal with that. But this seems like even though there was high latitudes and there was snow, a lot of animals and a lot of dinosaurs were still doing well, which is quite good. So yeah, really awesome. So there's kind of two interpretations that we've got in this mod here. I picked the prehistoric planet one because that's probably the coolest color. And we've also got the fur going on here, the fur shader put on here. So yeah, it looks really, really nice. Definitely a big fan. And I really love how Hansel Tree did like the feathered tail. I think it looks so nice. I think it adds a lot of character to this guy. So yeah, really, really nice Nanuqsaurus. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. So really, really hope if you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.